Hello, welcome to RevelatorAlf. So in this quick video I'm talking about Harley Davidson Softails, the brake discs, giving them a service and making sure they're running right. Catch you inside. RevelatorAlf. Hello, welcome to RevelatorAlf. Hope you're all well. Right, so this one is all about the brake disc, and I'm going to get to the rear one in a minute because they're slightly different. I'm talking about the stock discs, and if you watch my other video, how to improve your braking or make upgrades for free, you could also go for upgraded brake discs, of course. But I'm basically just going to talk about this disc here. This is on the Sport Glide, so it really depends which bike you're running and what brake disc you've got. Right. There are different styles, of course. A lot of the modern brake discs now, what they call these kind of floating discs or semi-floating discs, and they've got these kind of pins here which hold on the outer part of the brake disc to the inner part. Now, what that allows is for thermal expansion of the disc. I see quite a few people or videos or online blogs saying that you're supposed to get these to free up, you know, make them spin around. I'm not sure where that's come from, but you really shouldn't do that. All they're designed to do is to allow for that expansion between the outer part of the disc and the inner part of the disc, and to allow it to move up and down, move in and out. It's not supposed to make it rotate round and round. If you actually create more rotation through there, you're actually increasing the wear of the little spring inside, and that's going to lead to brake play and also brake failure in the worst case. So I wouldn't do that. That, I think, comes from racing applications with different styles of brakes where you can do that, but road use for this kind of thing, no, you don't need to do that. So all you need to do is just get some brake dust, whatever type you want, and just spray it liberally over the disc, and then just give it a good wipe down. Go all over the disc and make sure it's thoroughly clean. Now, obviously, you could give your brake discs a good old wash beforehand and everything, but all I'm saying is regularly give them a good squirt of brake cleaner. Okay, so the other thing you want to check is actually any wear on the disc. Go right to the very edge and see if there's any kind of lip on there. If there's any kind of lip on there, get them checked out. It doesn't mean that they're out of limit. It just might mean that they might need a skim down, also on a lathe or something like that. Also, what you want to make sure that the brake disc thickness is within tolerance as well. It really depends which bike you have and what that tolerance is and what that thickness is, so I can't really give you a specific figure, but that's something to check as well. It's going to be with older discs, not with brand new discs, I would say that. The other thing to consider is brake disc warping, or what the Americans call run out as well. You might have some kind of brake warping. Really, let's say if you've been using a lot of braking, then all of a sudden you rapidly cool your brakes, you know, squirt water on them, that kind of thing. That can lead to it as well. Over a period of time, if you're using a lot of hard braking, that could warp them as well. And again, different brake discs will warp more than others according to the materials that they're made from. Now, an easy way to check this really is just to lift the tyre up off the wheel, spin it around, and just measure. If you hold your fingers right next to it, you'll notice if there's actually movement away from the disc. It's not a scientific way because you need a proper gauge, but I'm just talking about checking this out at home. If you're ever in doubt, take it to a mechanic or a dealer and make sure that they can test it for you. You can even test this as you're riding along. You're slowing down. If you start to put on the brakes, you'll feel some kind of play if it's quite severe. If it's quite severe, there's going to be some play in your braking. You're actually going to feel it as well. So get those checked out. If you're riding along, if you kind of have a little sneak down look at your brake disc as you're riding along, you might be able to do it depending on what setup you've got, of course. You might see there's a little bit of movement as well. So under braking, slow braking, even hard braking, you might get a little bit of chatter as well. So that's something to consider. So just make sure that the brake disc is clean, make sure that it's fully serviceable, right thickness, and it's not warped as well. That's something you want to do. This brake disc here, as I say, is a sort of floating, semi-floating one. All it means that it allows for expansion from the inner part of the brake disc and the outer part. You got these holes in here as well that allow for heat dissipation as well, so that's a good thing. If they were solid, then the chances are that you'd overheat more. With holes in there, they've actually allowed for a lot more cooling. Alright, let's talk about the rear disc. Okay, rear disc maintenance is exactly the same. Give it a good old thorough clean with a brake cleaner, wipe it down. If you're going to put any kind of winterization protection over your bike, you can spray, ACF 50 or whatever it is all over your bike, no problem. But make sure that you wipe down your brake discs afterwards. Now you can clean them, of course, with any kind of washing detergent, any bike wash or anything, but say afterwards, make sure you give them a good old clean with the brake disc. The next thing to do, again, measure the thickness as well. Make sure that's within tolerance. It really depends on your bike as well. Also, have a look for that lip as well. Again, that was really going to be for an old worn out disc as well. But see if it's within tolerance. Again, you want to check for warp disc. Again, lift the rear of the bike, make sure it's in neutral. You're going to have a motorcycle lift for this, or motorcycle jack as well, and then just spin it around. Just put your finger on the frame and just rest it right next to the disc. Spin the wheel and see if there's any movement there. If there is, then it still might be within tolerance, but it's something you might need to get checked out as well. Again, this is not an official way to do it. This is kind of something that you can just check at home if you haven't got the proper tooling. Then you need to get a proper gauge on there, which the dealership or a mechanic will have, or you could buy one yourself, of course. But they are quite expensive just for this job. But say, just get your finger on there, rest it on the disc, spin the wheel, and see if there's any movement that the brake disc touches your finger and then moves away from your finger. If it does, then you might have to warp disc. It might not be severe, it might be within tolerance, but something you need to get checked out. Now, if you look on the rear disc here, this isn't a floating disc. Let me just get you in there. See, it's not a floating disc, it's a solid piece and it's mounted to the hub directly. Now, this disc also has holes in it as well for heat dissipation. There's a lot of machined gaps in the disc itself as well, and that's going to help with cooling as well. You've got to ask, why is there a difference between the front disc and the rear disc on this particular bike, or on a lot of motorcycles? Actually, a lot of this comes to do with a lot of factors, really. First of all, you're really going to be using most of your braking on the front with most motorcycles. Let's say, 60, 70%, 75% on that front. That's where most of the heat is going to be generated. That's where you're going to want a different type of disc, a modern disc, to actually help with that expansion, that heat load and that heat dissipation. On the rear, obviously, it's going to be less braking. I know Harleys would tend to brake more with the rear, but still, most of it is still with the front. So actually, you can get away with just a solid mounting. You don't need as much heat dissipation because not as much heat is generated as well. An upgrade you could do, you could have front and rear disc upgraded, of course. You could do all that kind of stuff, but say that's the reason why. There's also a money saving aspect to this as well. You can have a more expensive disc on the front, cheaper on the rear. It's a manufacturing company decision as well. But anyway, so that's it. That's something for you. Just make sure you're keeping your discs clean, you're checking the thickness, you're checking the warping on them or the run out on them as well, and just to say, just keep them in good condition and just check for any kind of problem on there. If there's any kind of surface rust, that doesn't matter. That isn't really an issue. And what you'll probably find, if you've just recently washed your bike and then you leave it, or you've been riding in the rain, then you leave it, you'll find that they get rusty quite quickly. That's not a problem, because as soon as you start using the brakes again, they're going to clean them off. Once you've given your bike a wash or any kind of service or anything like that, as you're riding along, just lightly apply the brakes, and that will start cleaning the brakes as well. Then start to periodically use them a little bit more. If you've put new pads in, then you need to bed those in as well, over 100 miles or so. So again, play with the brakes, bed those in as well. But this video is more just about the discs. Right, hopefully you found that useful. Right, on to the next video, whenever that is. You know the score. Like, share, subscribe, website. Ta-da.